Chapter 1. Setup. Leopard geckos are fairly small creatures and they do not need a lot of room. Usually a 10-gallon tank is big enough for one adult leopard gecko or a few babies. Most people use glass aquariums or fish tanks. These are fairly cheap and can be purchased at most pet stores. Wooden cages, large plastic tubs, or even large shoe boxes work. If you're going to use plastic tubs or shoe boxes, make sure to drill some holes on the lid or on the side so your leopard gecko could breathe fresh air. Some people like to use a larger tank for their geckos. So a 20-gallon tank could house 2 to 4 geckos. Now you need some kind of substrate, something to cover the bottom of your gecko's enclosure. This will make the floor softer and warmer for Leo. My favorite kind of substrate is probably the reptile carpet. I have my Leo on reptile carpet right now, and these work really well. They're really easy to clean and looks pretty good in the enclosure. But paper towels and newspapers can also be used. These are probably the easiest substrate you can use, but they don't look as natural. Other substrates you can try are tile, aspen, and repti bark. These are not the best substrate you can use, but you could try them. Now, there's a thing going on with sand as substrate. Leopard geckos tend to lick things to help them smell, and some are known to be impacted from licking and ingesting sand. Some Leos that are housed on sand live just fine, but there are chances that it will get impacted and it could die. Calcium sand is actually even worse than normal sand. It actually encourages your lizard to lick it, and it is not digestible. Okay, only this calcium is digestible, but not the sand. And it is your decision whether or not to house your gecko on sand. You need to provide your gecko somewhere to hide and rest. Without hides, your gecko will feel exposed and vulnerable, and it could become ill. You can purchase many different hides from pet stores, but you can also use a cut-up tissue box. You should have at least one hide in your gecko's home, but having 2 or 3 is perfect. Leopard geckos need a bowl of fresh water every day, so make sure he has a big water dish. Put the water dish away from the heat source. Don't worry, we'll talk about heating in a minute. Some people have food and calcium dishes in their gecko's enclosure, but this is not mandatory. We'll talk more about food and calcium dishes in the next chapter. Leopard geckos are reptiles, and they do not produce their own body heat. When reptiles feel cold, they will move to a warm spot, usually under the sun, and bask. After, when they feel too hot, reptiles will move to a shady place to cool down. And that's why you should have a warm side and a cool side in your gecko's tank. When your Leo feels cool, he'll move to the warmer side of the tank, and when he gets too hot, he'll move down to the cooler side. In the daytime, the temperature at the cool side of the tank should be around 80 degrees Fahrenheit to room temperature. The hotter side should be around 90. To heat up the warm side, you will need some kind of heat source. The 2 heat sources that I recommend are the heat lamp and the UTH, or under tank heater. Most people prefer the UTH. It is stuck on the bottom of the tank and it will warm your gecko's belly and help with digesting. The heat lamp is usually an extra thing. It is often used when the UTH doesn't provide enough heat. If you're using a heat lamp, a heat bulb is needed. I prefer a 75-watt red bulb because leopard geckos cannot see red light. A bulb that produces white light can prevent your gecko from coming out from its hiding place, and it could damage its eyesight. Turn off the heat source at night. The whole tank can be room temperature. Leave the heat lamp on if it's too cold. Put 2 thermometers on each side of the tank to prevent it from getting too hot or too cold. Luckily, leopard geckos are nocturnal and they do not need UV lighting. And that's it. This is what all you'll need for a basic leopard gecko setup. An enclosure, substrate, hides, water, food and calcium dishes, heat source, and a thermometer. But there are many other wonderful things you can put in your gecko's enclosure to make it more comfortable. First off, if you're using a glass tank, a screen top may be needed. It prevents other pets from harming your leopard gecko, and it is also handy when you're using a heat lamp. Leopard geckos are not very good climbers, so as long as it is in a tall enough enclosure, a lid is not mandatory. Some people have a humid hide in their gecko's habitat. They put some moist peat moss or paper towel in a hide to make it humid. This helps your gecko shed, but you don't have to have it. Decorations can also be put in a gecko's habitat. Plastic plants, driftwood, and smooth rocks can be used. Just make sure to wash these really well if you found them outside instead of a pet store. Thank you so much for watching this video, and stay tuned for chapter 2.